You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Kelly Cohen is joining us. And Kelly, welcome to the Final Say Radio Show, first of all. It's a pleasure
how
to
are
have
you? Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, this part is fascinating. We're talking history, we're talking the seriousness of some of these foreign policy issues, but for those of us who are political junkies that watch elections and try to forecast it, it's almost like you're picking the Final Four, except for we're trying to decide who's the next senator in some state that we've maybe been to once or twice, if we've even been to it. But it is fascinating, and it's very interesting, some of the results. In fact, as I'm looking through the news today, we have another result, and we have picked up, or the Republicans have picked up yet another seat, so that's 8, I believe. And, we still have the Louisiana, and was there one more left to be decided, or is it just Louisiana at this time?
I think it's just Louisiana.
Okay. So, again, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and it goes to show you one other thing, by the way, that some of these elections were so close that literally having the ground game to knock on 5 or 10 extra doors, district by district, when you add that up, it could be the 1,000 or 2,000 votes that someone wins or loses an election on, and that's a big deal. It really is.
Yeah, you never think of it in that way. That's interesting.
It is, but so as were there any surprises as you saw the results coming through?
I guess I knew that Congress was going to become controlled by the GOP. I had a feeling. I knew that they were going to pick up more House seats. I think for me the biggest surprise was all the wins for governors. You look at a map and basically now the entire country is red, be it governor, House, Senate, and it's crazy just that it had that big of a pickup. And I knew people, watching the news, I knew voters were upset. I knew they were sick of the direction the country was going in. But who knew that they were going to make such huge strides and now really gives the GOP a huge chance for the next 2 years to do something big. And then if they play their cards right, set themselves up successfully for 2016. So I think 2014 was huge for them, but like the bigger picture, which is obviously getting the White House in 2016, I think was the bigger ramification from this year's election, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I tend to agree with what you just said, but I also look at this as when we look towards 2016, and let's just focus on a presidential election where, I guess the two names from the Democratic Party are Hillary and then maybe Elizabeth Warren. And, Joe Biden occasionally will be mentioned, but I don't think that's serious. That would be fun.
And Martin O'Malley, but I don't think that's real either.
But when you look at the bench being created by the Republicans in the states, a whole list of governors, qualified people who are gaining experience as attorneys general or running state houses throughout the country, who, some of which will be future congressmen, senators, some may be governors. This is pretty deep, and so I ask myself, when you look at both generationally and in terms of quantity and quality, whose party seems to have a brighter future?
Well, if there's any indication, it's what happened last Tuesday, and I think GOP is making strides. I think they struggled a lot in the past few years, and this is my opinion, with just kind of moving on past issues that a lot of the American public had moved on past. Like, okay, this happened, this is what happened. The American people were like, we're ready to move on. We want to take the country forward, and I think the GOP had issues with kind of getting stuck in the mud, I guess, with issues like that. And, whatever they may be, it could be Obamacare, it could be a scandal, anything like that. I think, especially with the media, will become focused on a big issue and kind of play it up like, oh, the GOP is stuck on this, Democrats are moving forward, helping the country. I think they were kind of stuck on that, and then 2014, these elections showed that they've moved past that, I guess, stigma. I don't know. I was talking with a fellow millennial about this a few weeks ago, about how the GOP's kind of been able to move past the issues that were kind of dogging them for a while, and it really played out big last Tuesday. So, yeah, I think the GOP has the brighter future if they continue on this path of we want to help the country. We're going to save the country. Let's move forward on these key issues. And we saw that in the elections last week, which I think is big for them.
Yeah. Now, I follow you on Twitter, and I've read many of your pieces over time with the Washington Examiner. And now you're just like John and I. We like to get engaged.
Oh man, I spend too much time on Twitter.
It is addicting, that's for certain. And so I've managed to get myself mostly off of Facebook and just to Twitter. Mm-hmm. But you cover so many issues. As you did your pieces with the Washington Examiner. But right now, you have two time periods. You have the next month and a half or 2 months, if you will. We'll call it this period where God knows what's going to happen, and I'm very frightful. But then you have the period where the Republicans actually control the Senate.
Right.
What do you expect some of the things that you think the White House may do? Are there some Democrats within congressional members that you feel will go along with the Republicans to try to repair some of the things that have been damaged? Maybe whether it's repealing health care or pieces that really need to go, things like the Keystone Pipeline, some of the trade agreements. I mean, there's so many things to look at. But what, in your opinion, do you think will be some of the first things or most important things?
If you saw today, which just happened 10 minutes ago, Mary Landrieu said she's ready to move on Keystone. And then Kevin McCarthy's bringing a bill tomorrow to pass it. It was, I think, they announced it, 10 minutes ago. She just gave a huge speech, and she's obviously she's getting ready to go through a runoff, and now she's, I'm scared. They're going to start painting me as someone who's anti-oil, anti-energy. I got to start. I have to pass Keystone. I need to align with the GOP. So I think that's a good example in terms of name drop, but I think overall you're going to definitely see Democrats maybe become a little more inclined to listen to Republicans, not just in the 2 weeks or the 2 months until the end of 2014, but especially in the beginning of 2015, because they know, like I said earlier, the implications of 2016. They have to start thinking ahead that way. They need to start. This is why GOP took control of Congress. We need to see what they did right, and we need to hop on board to save ourselves, I guess, because, a lot of people will be up for re-election in 2016 as well, not just, the White House up for grabs. So I don't know if I can name any specifics, but like I said just now, Mary Landrieu said she's going ahead with Keystone, and that's obviously an effort to save herself in the runoff. And then maybe other Democrats are going to, if she wins the runoff, even if she doesn't, I think Democrats are going to say, wait, we should be jumping on this, bandwagon to maybe start picking up issues that Americans agree with the GOP on so that we can save ourselves down the road and look good.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, John mentioned yesterday it's almost like the GOP is on probation, and I certainly agree with him on that, because we were lucky with the alignment of the senatorial elections, what seats were up, and it seemed to weight towards us. I think we missed opportunities last time around, and I feel as though if we play this smart, meaning, don't go overboard, but do things that the American people, those who are making the decisions at the polls, could really relate to and understand and begin to trust the Republican Party more, I think it plays well, one, for 2016, but to keep some of these gains. And I'll throw one other thing, because you mentioned Landrieu. I find it ironic that now, because she's in serious trouble after 6 years of really trying to push the Keystone Pipeline, where almost everyone is shaking their heads like, wasn't that a no-brainer, like when it was first mentioned, that, now you're ready?
No, I didn't even think 6 years. Wow. I can't believe it's been that long.
It seems like it, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting to see. I think a lot of other Democrats are probably going to follow that lead, whether her saying that today saves her or not in the runoff. I think it's probably telling that the Democrats are now scared, and they're scared that the Republicans are going to make moves. Whether, obviously it's going to be hard if Congress passes legislation, whether or not Obama's going to veto it or not. Obviously whether he vetoes it or not doesn't matter, but I think as long as Congress continues to show, hey, America, you cared about A, B, and C, and we took care of A, B, and C, and Obama didn't, that'll play really well for the Republicans in 2016. So Democrats kind of face, a hard time. Like, do they want to agree with the Republicans to paint themselves okay for 2016, or do they want to try to go ahead and continue to oppose whatever Republicans push through and then hope it doesn't backfire again in 2015 like it did now? So I think that makes sense.
Right. Well, I know John's dying to get into the conversation. He's got several things to ask you, so I'll have John join us in. Go ahead, John.
Okay.
There he was. John, you there?
Oh.
Anyway, he must be having hold issues. Anyway, one quick question, actually, that really an important one, and something that caught my attention being brought up in our chat room right now. And I think this was very telling of what to expect maybe from the White House. But when the president made the comment the other day that, I heard the 1/3, but I also heard the 2/3 of the voters who didn't show up, that's a very interesting statement. And really, it's a combination of arrogant and tone deaf, right?
Yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't matter who voted or didn't vote. It's I guess it does, but in the long run, his party lost out, and it probably also lost out because a lot of Democrats connect themselves to Obama, and a lot of Americans are not pleased with Obama. And I guess maybe that was a way. Yeah, it was very arrogant, kind of a way to deflect the criticism that might come his way for the midterm election results, I guess. But, I'm not surprised. That entire speech was really arrogant and weird.
Well, I think if, and I apologize, Mike is broken, and then I had to mute because I tossed it across the room. In a while, human nature gets the better of you over equipment malfunctions. Anyway,
I've been there. Don't worry.
One of the things I want to make a quick, and you'll notice I very rarely jump on the big Reagan bandwagon. I actually think the GOP does that too much. But one of the things that I think really separated Reagan from many of the folks is there were two things, and I don't think it was genius. There was a lot of conviction there, but I think basically he provided a simple, positive message, and he had conviction and motivation. And I think that's part of what we need right now. It occurred to me analyzing this election that to a large extent, we have two really negative parties. The GOP has been sort of seen as the party of no, which is, I think, if you're a small government fan, is a necessity versus the Santa Claus party. But the DNC has been the party of the sky's falling, everything, the entire planet's going to come up and swallow us up and eat us alive, and, forget all those other things. And I think one of the most important aspects, if you follow through on the GOP is on probation, is they need to stop being reactive to the Democrats and start painting a clear, articulate picture of this is what's broken, this is what needs to be fixed, and we're sort of all in this together, but bring forward a positive message. So I want to get your feelings on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard. It's GOP's kind of struggled with that because they have so many outspoken leaders and voices that sometimes clash with each other. And, whether you think Ted Cruz is right or wrong, or, whether you think someone else that's really loud is right or wrong in the party, I think that a lot of people get turned off by that disconnect between leaders. Like, I feel whenever I see the Democrats coming out and talking, they're all kind of on the same page. Whether what they're saying is completely loony or completely genius, they're always usually on the same page. And if they have loud voices within themselves, within the party that disagree with one another, they kind of hide it, I guess. One of my friends said that the Democrats are really good at hiding, those crazy voices, whereas the Republicans kind of struggle with that. And I think that's something they've kind of have been working on, and they need to continue working on, especially, like I said earlier, if they want to have a successful last 2 years of the Obama presidency, and then they want to have a successful 2015, to definitely work on being unified and kind of saying, this is what we want done, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Obama, you're either with us and the American people, or you're against us and the American people. So we'll see how they kind of deal with that.
That's interesting. As much as Obama likes to call them the most transparent men in history, really the party does a great job of organized opacity. So they do a good job of holding that together.
Whether you agree or disagree with Democrats and some of their policies, and my friend that told me this is pretty liberal, he was like, honestly, the Democratic Party does a really good job. So a very good job of hiding. They're crazy people. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt because he's liberal, but it's interesting because it's true in a sense. Whereas you have a lot more outspoken and people arguing with each other. Ted Cruz saying, I dislike you, or Mitch McConnell saying, I dislike you, where it's someone in their own party as opposed to a Democrat. So I think that's kind of like an interesting way. Whether that's right or wrong, or whether that seems a little far-fetched, I think it's interesting going forward.
Well, I think one of the challenges we have here is this is an election, and it has been for quite some time, of party wins versus performance wins. And so we don't necessarily have, it's like the GOP won, let's face it. They didn't win. The Democrats lost.
Right.
And that's a sobriety check that I think the GOP has to make upon themselves, because it seemed to me in many of the elections there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3% that often went to an independent. When you look at how marginally close many of these races are, you realize that as much as guys like Rush Limbaugh like to chastise and marginalize those people in the middle, I think the reality is that many, many people in this country are so fed up with both parties that what they're really looking for is good governance.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm from Florida, and the governor's race was very close. And if you look at the vote tallies, had the independent candidate could have swung the election either way. And I think that was true in a lot of other races, not necessarily governor's races in the country. But I think, at least for me, in my opinion, I'm more of a candidate person than a party person. And I think as I've been covering the elections and just following the news here at work, I see a lot of politicians on the left and the right and more the center say a lot of stuff, but they don't do a lot of stuff. And I think that's what a lot of voters felt like this election. They were like, I don't care if you're Republican or you're Democrat or what your name is or how long you've been in office or haven't been in office. It's what are you going to be able to actually do for me? I think the past few years, no one's really done much, whether you were Republican or Democrat. So I think that's what a lot of voters went to the polls for this year, was to say, okay, I think this person isn't doing a good job anymore. I don't care if he's Republican or Democrat. He's out. I'm going to vote in the new guy because he has a better shot of actually working. So we'll see if it pays off the next 2 years.
Now, there's one last issue I want to touch on with you. We constantly hear that it's always jobs and economy and that nobody really cares about foreign policy. But I kind of think it's one of the areas the GOP blows the DNC away. And I think whether you're looking at energy independence, national security, sovereignty and border issues, but even things like infrastructure, trade deficits, et cetera, all of these things are sort of key components that when we were winning those, we had what we refer to as the American century. Even though they might look at it as a jobs and economy issue, do you get a visceral sense that people get the fact that that it's not going to be another American century, that America is quickly losing, and ergo we will all go down with the ship together? I sort of get that sense, and I think the GOP would do well to reconnect people with that and get away from, not even let the Democrats drag them into the abortion, the race, the hating women, minimum wage, all these other things that I think really are distractions to the grander scheme of having a strategy.
I think in my opinion, I think you should probably, the social issues are important, obviously, and they mean a lot to a lot of people. But for me, as a voter, and I know a lot of my friends agree with this, and a lot of my colleagues agree with this, that you should vote based on kind of like bigger picture. That makes sense. Like what's wrong with the country? How can it be fixed? Who's going to fix it? Where do I want to see the country move? And I think the GOP should capitalize on that, and then all the other issues can we're going to take care of immigration and securing the border and take care of that first, and then once we do that, all those other little issues can fall into place, and then they can all, kind of work together to better the country. Not just let's focus on, like in Colorado, they really focused hard on women's contraception, which obviously was a downfall for the Democratic candidate. And it's just, I think, the GOP could definitely work and will fare better if they focus on those issues, like you said, like border security, immigration, foreign policy, trade. I think that people care about those, but the problem is the mob mentality is to care about social issues, where voters are probably not going to vote on those issues as much as people think. So maybe move to the bigger macro issues, and then the micro issues will fall into play as they're supposed to.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. One last question, and this is Brett again. The president's over in China, as are many of these leaders at this conference in Beijing. And a very interesting picture, by the way, of Putin and Xi Jinping and Barack Obama wearing their pretty little outfits.
Right. From Star Trek.
Right. But do you get a sense, I mean, when you look at the pictures, I think it says it all. But it's almost as though we have a president who's managing the handover of, I don't want to call it world domination, but being a superpower to give up as much as he's willing to the Chinese. And Vladimir Putin's kind of got the smirk on like, wow, this is too easy.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not like as well versed in foreign policy as I should be. I kind of know the basics, so I'm not going to say anything grandiose. That's
right.
Right. But I do think definitely Obama is kind of over there, and it does kind of look like if you look at Obama at this meeting compared to the last one and the last one and the last one, you kind of wonder how is the U.S. kind of like falling off the map. You have Russia doing they have these bomber patrols that are going to start running regular tests just flying over the Gulf of Mexico, or not the Gulf of Mexico, or was it the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah, it's the Gulf.
Yeah, the Gulf of Mexico. Well, I said it, and then I realized that my home is on the Gulf of Mexico in Florida, and when I actually said it scared me. In the Caribbean, and they're just running these bomber planes all over to just run missions, and you're like, wait a second, does no one seem to find a problem with this? Like, they're flexing their muscles, they're showing their dominance, and we're kind of, as a foreign policy in the U.S., kind of rolling over and saying, okay, that's good, sure, bring your, let it happen, I guess. I don't know what's really going on there, but it's scary.
I think, regardless of the foreign policy part of it, I think the problem is the lack of the leadership. And as I said, I don't know if you heard me before, but I was saying, I fear this short period until the Senate is in the control of the Republicans, but I certainly fear the fact that we have 2 more years, and I just kind of sit here, I'm cringing, and I'm like just slightly hopeful that we'll get through this. But
it's definitely a lack of leadership. It is a lack here. Yeah, I see the lack of leadership very well, and we've had, our issues with, I feel like our allegiance with Israel is as rocky as it's ever been. We're supposed to be extreme allies with. We're just having all sorts of lack of leadership problems and communication problems. You have people Biden saying, oh no, Netanyahu and I are buds, and then people in the Obama administration calling Netanyahu all these names behind his back, and it's definitely a lack of leadership and a lack of clear direction. Like, how do you want to lead as a president, as an administration, when it comes to the U.S. being a superpower? Because I don't know. And I wish I knew why.
I'd add, there's times I feel like there isn't an adult in the room, especially some of these advisors who make some of these statements
I agree.
Just imagine if Bush or Reagan or Bush Sr. were in office with some of these things going on. The media, the mainstream media, would be going absolutely berserk.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I think, that's another part of the problem, but that's for a whole other segment. Anyway.
A whole nother chat.
Kelly Cohen, it's been a pleasure having you. And you do have a piece out just a few days ago. I'm sorry, about an hour ago, or very recently, on the Russian bomber crossing into the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico. And this is certainly an ongoing thing and troublesome. And I guess you have to ask yourself the question, are we doing the same thing, or are we just completely naive?
It's interesting to see. Congress is back in session, and it's already a crazy day. First day back, and it's crazy.
Absolutely. Well, again, I know you have a Twitter, so I'll let you share that with our listeners. And, of course, we encourage everybody to go follow Kelly.
Yeah. It is Politicohen, so PICOHEN. So it's basically like my last name morphed into politics, I guess, with an underscore at the end. So Politicohen _.
Very creative. Anyway, again,
I know,
thank you
giggle.
so much. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on Twitter, and look forward to having you back on the program. Take care.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Take care.
Bye.